Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the blue-white synthesizer deck, which has picked up some new tools with Marvel superheroes. Our main build around, of course, is still Simulacrum Synthesizer. Will still be in standard for a couple months. A 3-mana artifact that lets you scry 2 when it enters, and then whenever another artifact you control with mana value 3 or greater enters, you get to make one of these construct tokens, which grows with the number of artifacts you control. And this deck is capable of making some very large constructs very quickly. Our new additions include the Mind Stone, a 2-mana indestructible artifact that can tap for a white mana, perfect for setting up some of our 4-drops on turn 3. And then later we can also maybe harness the Mind Stone by paying 6 mana and tapping it. And then now at the beginning of our end step, we get to exile up to one other target non-land permanent we control and return it to the battlefield. So it can flicker one of our non-land permanents, including maybe some of our 3-mana artifacts, which can then in turn also help enable the synthesizer to make additional constructs, so that's certainly an interaction that can come up in grindier matchups. And the turn 2 Mind Stone is perfect for setting up a turn 3 United Battlefront, which is one of the big payoffs in this archetype, looking at the top 7 cards of our library, putting up to 2 non-creature non-land permanents with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. And almost every non-land card in this deck can be found with a United Battlefront, including maybe a synthesizer alongside some of our other 3-drops, so we can immediately start making those tokens. So that's really our general game plan. We've got Repurposing Bay as a 3-drop that can help tutor up additional artifacts. If we sacrifice a 2-drop, we can find a 3-drop, including the synthesizer or some of our removal spells. And then once we're ready to close out the game, Repurposing Bay sacking a 3-drop can now also find the one-off Fire Crystal, which can maybe once again make some more constructs when it enters. And then now all our creatures have haste, so all those newly generated tokens can immediately attack to often close out the game. Then at 2 mana, we have the full set of Clay-Fired Bricks as an artifact that can find planes and gain 2 life, and then later we're happy to sacrifice it to the Repurposing Bay to get a 3-drop. Same with a Spring-Loaded Saw Blades, dealing 5 damage to a tapped creature, can play that instant speed as well, so that gives us some early removal that can later still get a 3-drop. And then the Mind Stone can also be sacrificed to a Repurposing Bay if needed, but usually we like it to generate some mana early on. And then alongside the Mind Stone, I'm also playing 2 copies of the Iron Crag, which is just a weaker version of the Mind Stone in this deck, which just makes colorless mana. But since both are legendary and we don't necessarily want to draw multiples, it's better to have a split. And this is another way for us to cast a turn 3 Battlefront. And then the Cryogen Relic is also great here, as it draws when it enters and when it leaves the battlefield, so perfect to sack to our Repurposing Bay to draw 2 cards overall. And if we exile it with our own Star Cage, we also get to draw once again. This is a great sweeper to deal with all the early mana elves from all the various green decks, just a good card against aggro in general, exiling all artifacts and creatures with mana value 2 or less until it leaves the battlefield. So we can usually stack the triggers so that we first exile all creatures and then afterwards generate a synthesizer token so that doesn't get swept up. And then Perilous Snare is kind of your bread and butter 3-mana removal spell in white that can exile any non-land permanent when it enters. Can also maybe start your engines, but we rarely get to max speed before the game is over. And then Braided Net as a one-off can also maybe be found with Repurposing Bay as a way to maybe tap down hasty creatures, which we otherwise don't have many ways to interact with. And then later can also transform into the Kipu, which can be another nice source of card advantage that will also once again trigger the synthesizer when it transforms. And then at 4 mana, besides the Battlefront, we've got the one-off Fire Crystal that we usually don't want to draw, since for double red it's pretty tricky for us to cast, but not impossible, as we'll see here in a second. And then a one-off Aura Sight, which we're also not going to hit with our Battlefront, but it is still a 4-drop that we can maybe tutor up with a Repurposing Bay if we sack a 3-drop, and then it can act as another copy of Perilous Snare that also taps for a white mana. And then our mana base also got a nice upgrade with Castle Doom, which now makes a mana of any color to cast our artifact spells. So this is how we can potentially cast a Fire Crystal if we have 2 copies of Castle Doom in play. But it can also pay 3 mana, tap and sacrifice an artifact to make a 3/3 Doombot token. So that can maybe be a backup win condition if something bad happens to all our synthesizers, and can also just be a nice mana sink against the more controlling decks. We also have a one-off Fomori Vault, which can also maybe discard some of our useless cards to dig for additional artifacts. And then we've got some additional mana fixing here, Archive entering tapped but letting us Surveil, Hallowed Fountain, Floodfarm Verge, and then plenty of basics, including the planes that we need to find with the clay-fired bricks. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. We've got Mind Stone into hopefully turn 3 Battlefront. If not, I can always use the bricks to get an extra land. Opponent to red-green, turn 1 Elves. And do we change plans and go for bricks first now? Yeah, maybe that's reasonable. Because then we might go for Stark Age, and I don't necessarily want to exile the Mind Stone. Or I can go Mind Stone plus Saw Blades next turn. So we've got a few options. Just another tapped Stomping Ground. So then I'm liking a Mind Stone plus Saw Blades. And then next turn Battlefront, looking for Synthesizer. If I draw land, I could also just Repurposing Bay activate to find it. So this is probably a World War Hulk deck, which could go off with just 5 mana, if they put in a Galta, for instance. Found the land. Does that change my play? Can't really interact with their hands, I just need to get on the board. Battlefront, if it finds Synthesizer, is the best way to do so. So I think we still try that. And we failed. So, Relic times 2 over bricks. Well, that could maybe use the extra land. We're also somewhat likely to draw one. Ironcrag can also make mana. So we have options, but double Relic plays well with Stark Age if we ever want to set that up. So pretty disappointing Battlefront. Might have worked out better if I went for Repurposing Bay activates. Opponent's got a Terror of the Peaks, that one's beatable. And a Parallel Snare. Okay, so now with 6 mana, I think we just play one Repurposing Bay, snare the Terror, and then next turn we can get the Synthesizer going. Summon Fenrir goes away. But yeah, the threat of a World War Hulk into Galta is still there. And yeah, there it is. So they get to play a red or green creature for free. It's gonna be Urani. Does have protection from white, so won't be able to snare it. So then my best hope is to just go bigger with a bunch of tokens. They get 3 counters, and then on chapter 3, double a creature's power. So yeah, I need to at least threaten lethal next turn. So then, yeah, I guess we get Synthesizer. I can also maybe exile World War Hulk itself. That's still an option. Aura Sight's still not gonna be super effective. There's also Braided Net, which can tap down Urani. So I guess we'll go Braided Nets. And then I can Aura Sight just to be mana efficient. Exile the enchantments. And look for another Repurposing Bay is good. So the Braided Net taps down Urani. Opponent did have another World War Hulk. So I guess I can wait for them to choose one of the chapters. Starts from chapter 1. I guess it doesn't have read ahead. So I got that mixed up with other sagas. So there was never really a threat of them just winning with Urani this turn. But yeah, now with another Repurposing Bay coming up, we should be able to take over the board pretty quickly. So step 1, get Synthesizer. Sacking Relic is always fine. And don't need either of those. And then Repurposing Bay. Sacrifice the bricks at this point. Or we can go for saw blades in case we want to transform this. And then do I get another synthesizer? I think I do. Keep the parallel snare on top. And then I can still tap down Urani here. Opponent did have a Galta left over. Only one card in hand, so it shouldn't be too bad. Does draw off Tyrants. Alright, that was actually not bad. Terror plus Speaker. So then the Speaker, after drawing with Tyrant, can still maybe get some other finisher to combine with the Terror. But they wouldn't be able to cast it right now. Yeah, a Raph and Mikey. Take 2. Tap down Urani. Nope, not that one. Alright, and then we should be able to figure out lethal here. So I first want to get another synthesizer, that's 2 mana. And then 3 mana for snare. And then 2 more mana for Fire Crystal. Should pretty much do it. So sack a 2-drop. Play snare. And then we can exile a blocker that would get in the way, Galta. And then activate Repurposing Bay, sacking a 3-drop. Could first activate the Braided Nets. And then sack a 3-drop that we're not going to miss. And get Fire Crystal. And this should be more than enough. So, didn't go for the most aggressive line, playing it safe with the Braided Nets. Maybe could have gone for Synthesizer sooner, but it worked out. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got Mind Stone and then plenty of interaction, bit of card draw with a Relic. Also good with a Star Cage. So could also maybe start with a Relic, depending on what we're up against. Blue-red, Aura Sight to draw. I'll play the Mind Stone, extra mana is always useful. And a Lantern, don't care about Graveyard Hate. So, yeah, going for Relic seems reasonable. Hold the Aura Sight to maybe exile a Tablet next turn. Could sack this to draw a card once again. But then we do need... I guess we don't need a target, can always just sacrifice it to draw. So it is maybe a Jeskai control deck. Pursue the past. Goes digging. So not expecting Saw Blades to be super effective, outside of maybe answering a Monk token from Jeskai Revelation. So I could just play it to have something to maybe later sacrifice to Repurposing Bay. Playing Star Cage does exile my own Mind Stone. I'll play the Saw Blades. But yeah, could have gone for Star Cage with the idea of exiling the Relic that way, but yeah, Repurposing Bay was a great draw. So play the Bay. And then probably start by sacking the Saw Blade, since there's still a chance we end up exiling the Relic with Star Cage. And get a Synthesizer going. And then don't need another Star Cage. Bricks is more fuel for Repurposing Bay, so I don't hate it. So yeah, Control, if they're not running some dedicated artifact removal, can struggle with Synthesizer matchup, since their spot removal and sweepers are not going to be able to keep up forever. They seem to be on a 4-color build actually, so they could have Inevitable Defeat to exile my artifacts. So that can certainly make the difference here. Okay, so what's my plan? Still bricks. See if that resolves. And then sacrifice the bricks to get another Synthesizer probably. Could also get another repurposing bay, which in turn can then still sack the relic. That's also decent. Makes use of my 2 mana here. Don't quite have lethal if I go for Fire Crystal, which is another play we can make here. But yeah, this way if they do have an answer to one Synthesizer, at least I'll still have another one in play. And if they wipe the board, it's not going to take too much to recover. Do we like a Fomori Vault? I don't hate it. It's extra mana with late game utility. Alright, Pyromancer's Goggles. Opponent is spicing it up. But then we can pretty easily exile with an Aura Sight or with a Snare. So yeah, we should have lethal here. Just a matter of sequencing properly. So I could first sack the Mind Stone, get another Synthesizer, and then get the Fire Crystal. That's the most I can do here. Want to avoid drawing cards if possible in case I accidentally draw the Fire Crystal. But now Bay, sack Bay, get Fire Crystal, and attack for 1,000,000. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We have a keepable hand. Facing turn 1 Swamp. So turn 2 can start with an Iron Crag. Opponent on a more controlling build, it seems. Yeah, let's start with Iron Crag, and then next turn we can maybe double spell Unholy Annex to go with their Soulstone Sanctuary, so they've got some demon synergies. Okay, with the castle, I could double 2-drop, or we just start with a Synthesizer. And then next turn I can Repurposing Bay activate if we scry into a land. Castle Doom, Hallowed Fountain. Do I want both? I can keep both on top, although if I end up searching with Repurposing Bay, I'll get rid of the Hallowed Fountain. Hedron Archive, alright, so opponent's going big. Maybe up to Ugin, who knows? So that could be a good one to remove. So then, Repurposing Bay, sack the Iron Crag. And get a Snare. So then we can expect some board wipes to deal with our tokens. But yeah, next turn we could already threaten lethal with a Fire Crystal. It's going to be a Ritual Chamber making a demon. That's fine. Alright, so what's the best I can do now? Star Cage gets rid of all the tokens. I do get one replacement, and then I could sack the Star Cage to get Fire Crystal, to get another token. So then I would end up with 2 hasty tokens, basically. It's not a bad line. Is there something better? Can just Repurposing Bay, sack the Relic, and get another Perilous Snare, for instance, to get rid of the token, attack. Is that lethal? It might actually be, since we'll get a bunch more artifacts in play here. So this is 5 mana. So I can even Iron Crag into Relic, into Repurposing Bay. Yeah, that should be enough. And can sack the relic. And get another snare, which triggers synthesizer. So then... I guess this is still 16 only. So not quite lethal. But if they don't make a demon, they die to the ritual chambers. And if they make a demon, they're probably not answering all my tokens. Yeah, standard doesn't have any great artifact lands, which can maybe help power up your constructs. Although, then again, artifact lands are a nombo with Pinnacle Starcage, since it would also get rid of them. So our opponent makes another demon. But yeah, opponent's just treading water here. So can play the bricks, get another Perilous Snare. Although we should already have lethal, just in case they had a Requiting Hex here to deal with one of the tokens. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got a decent hand. No acceleration to set up a turn 3 Battlefront. But a bit of card draw, interaction, and then hopefully Battlefront can carry us facing the Landfall deck. So I'm okay if they play some more 1 or 2 drops out. A Bantermole Cub. So Starcage lines up pretty well. And then hoping for a good Battlefront, hitting a couple synthesizers would be ideal. Start playing Castle Doom in case I need to hardcast the Fire Crystal as well. Okay, we found a repurposing bay for sure, and then I probably want a relic to go with the repurposing bay, so I have something to sacrifice next turn to get synthesizer. Alternatively, Braided Net can also maybe transform and draw cards, but this seems good enough. So the next turn I can get a synthesizer, and then with a 3-drop still trigger it. Do have to watch out for a Mightform Harmonizer killing us out of nowhere, especially if they have an Ice still in play to give them extra land drops. Okay, so as I mentioned, sack the relic and get synthesizer. Can also draw another one. And then another relic seems fine. So I could cast another synthesizer. It's probably a little safer to snare here. Get rid of Bill. And then next turn we can do some cool things, including maybe tutoring up a Fire Crystal. Our opponent's got the charm to exile a synthesizer, that's okay, we've got a backup. So I can play it and then still use Repurposing Bay to get Fire Crystal, although it's not necessarily gonna threaten lethal right now. So then, yeah, I'm a little bit short of Synthesizer, Relic, sack the Relic. But I think we still start here. And then an Aura Sight is okay to draw. Could also tutor it up. If I sack the snare, I get the Aura Sight, and then I can still play a Relic afterwards. I actually don't hate that. They temporarily get Bill back. And get the Aura Sights. Then do I get rid of Bill or the Ascension? The Trample could be scarier if they get to a 4th counter here. Yeah, let's get rid of the Ascension. And then with the extra mana, I can still play Relic. And then next turn with Repurposing Bay, we should easily figure something out. I don't think it's even worth it for me to attack, since they can potentially block and just sacrifice. and that leaves me more exposed. Alright, opponent's got the Mossborn. That is the type of card that could still win them the game if it goes unanswered. Opponent is pretty much tapped out, so we can tutor up an answer, but can we threaten lethal is the question. So I can first get another Synthesizer, sacking the Relic. So that's 2 mana. And then I've got 6 mana left over, which is enough for Ironcrag, Bay, activate. Yeah, that should be good enough here. So I guess hope we don't draw Fire Crystal. Could have maybe sacked Ironcrag instead. So get another Synthesizer. A Repurposing Bay triggers Synthesizer 2 more times. And then now I can sack Repurposing Bay to the Repurposing Bay and get Fire Crystal. Get 2 more tokens, everything will have haste. And this should be more than enough. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We've got a powerful hand, but a pretty slow hand, admittedly. Nothing on turn 2, and then turn 3, Synthesizer to maybe get some tokens going. Turn 4, we can interact, make a token. Could always snare on 3 if needed. But yeah, it's not ideal. Best case would be like 2 mana Accelerant into Battlefront, but that's not going to happen every game. But I feel like this is still maybe a little too slow. Don't have a 2-drop to sack the Repurposing Bay if I need to get Starcage. And I'm also going to have to deal myself a bit of damage. So close. On the play I would keep, on the draw I think we mulligan. Alright, this is a bit better. Can interact on 2 if needed. Could also bricks, get planes, set up Starcage on 3, and then hopefully Battlefront can take over. But 1 card has to go. So maybe I should just get rid of the Saw Blades, and then we have a guaranteed Starcage on 3. But the bricks also gets me to the Battlefront. Alright, so now we've got all the lands we need. Facing a robot deck with Shuri. Alright, so it's possible that Saw Blades would have worked out better. Starcage should still be effective. Now Cavern on Golem, maybe for Roaming Throne. And there's the Assault Robots. So good target for Starcage. And a Chrome Dome. Well, opponent's all in here, and they're not gonna like the Pinnacle Starcage next turn. I lose Clay-Fired Bricks. You lose everything else. Small chance I have a way to bounce the Starcage at some point. I see they're playing green for Pollinator as well. I remember considering that when playing the Robots deck myself. But yeah, I think it's Battlefront here. Find Synthesizer plus Snare. Yeah, opponent got pretty unlucky with how things lined up. And then we want to dig for some more 3-drops. Castle Doom's not the worst, but let's pass for now. Alright, bricks I can play. Could play the snare just to speed up my kill with the Synthesizer. I don't think there's any 1 card that I'm too scared of that my opponent could play that I need to save the snare for. So I don't mind running it out here. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. My hand needs 2 more lands, and then it's great. Especially a 3rd land to cast my interaction. I think we keep, but there is certainly a fail case here. A lot of my 2-drops also generate mana by either finding a plains or tapping for mana. Another Battlefront, usually the card you want to draw at all times, but not in this scenario. Alright, I'll take a Relic if it draws me into a land. And does not. So Disaster, opponent seems to be on the same archetype, and they're off to a functional start, let's say. So we'll sack Relic, hope to draw land. Alright, so we're not too far behind, but it's still not looking great. So what do I get rid of? Might be Starcage. It is good to kind of break serve and get rid of opposing tokens, but we already have one. Opponent's got their Battlefront on curve. And yeah, depending on what they hit, I might have to play catch-up. Another Bay and Authority. Authority is going to make it harder to set up a combo kill with Fire Crystal. So yeah, we're not in a great spot here, I'll admit. I think I still play the Synthesizer just for the Scry 2 mostly, but don't expect it to stick around for another turn. And then I could keep the Repurposing Bay as something I'm guaranteed to then hit with Battlefront. Opponent's got the Snare, but I guess that will be all for now. So at least they don't have their own Synthesizer in play yet. I get Repurposing Bay, and a Relic can be good to sack to the Repurposing Bay, maybe better than the extra mana from Ironcrag. Find the bricks. Opponent Starcages just to get rid of my Relic. That feels pretty weak. Alright, so we can Battlefront again. Find Synthesizer and Snare. Snare gets rid of their Snare, so we can get a Synthesizer back, make more tokens. And then, happy to keep the land. Snare afterwards to hit with Battlefront is fine. So, yeah. We had a rough start, but seeing the power of Battlefront catching us back up now. Opponent's got a Synthesizer. Always have to watch out for an opposing Fire Crystal killing us out of nowhere. But I think we're still safe here. They've got 2 cards in hand. They can activate Repurposing Bay to get a Fire Crystal or some other 4-drop. But they do not have a 2-drop to get another Synthesizer first. And then Battlefront is guaranteed to hit Snare, and Repurposing Bay could still maybe get something else. Opponent does go for Starcages to get rid of my 2 tokens. And they're gonna use Adagia. Alright, so couple options. I think going for Snare to get rid of Authority is actually a consideration. Yeah, let's just Battlefront. Find Snare and Repurposing Bay. Or do I get a 2-drop so I can sacrifice it to the Repurposing Bay? Or I guess just a Mind Stone so I can cast another 3-drop. Those are all legit. Yeah, I guess I'll get the Mind Stone here. And then first I can use the Snare to get rid of the Authority. Then make my tokens so they're not tapped. And then I can cast another Snare. Or I can even get a Fire Crystal here. So maybe going for Repurposing Bay made more sense. Because yeah, we have lethal here. And I could have just gotten a couple more robot tokens out of the deal. But yeah, I'll take it. So winning the mirror match here to get us to Mythic. And there we go, awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and with very solid hands. In fact, turn 3 Battlefront. That's why we're running the Mind Stone in part. But the late game utility of harnessing and flickering stuff can also be very useful in grindier matchups. Opponent with a Thundering Fall, so what I don't want to see is our opponent playing a second land and passing, especially if it's a white land, to represent No More Lies, which could counter stuff. Starting town pass. So they could have the No More Lies here. Could also be a Lessons, in which case Idle Quenchia can still get me. I think I still jam and hope for the best. Alright, that worked. Get Synthesizer. And then Starcage would enable it right away, but since we have Repurposing Bay, I'm happy with the 2-drop. And then first Search, and then Scry, so we don't undo the Scry with our shuffle. Braided Net is good enough. Alright, so we're off to a promising start. Opponent maybe on 4-color control. So then Inevitable Defeat could still deal with the Synthesizer, and they could now also have a counterspell up. So a Repurposing Bay activate would be best case scenario if it resolves, but I have to imagine they've got some interaction up here. So then I maybe get the Braided Net countered, and then resolve the Repurposing Bay next turn. Yep. Play another bricks. Back in the day, the 4-color control deck did play Ultima as their board wipe to destroy all artifacts as well, but I think most lists have moved on from that card. Alright, just a tablet here, so we've got free reign to resolve our Repurposing Bay. Although now we have to worry about our opponent casting a Jeskai Revelation next turn. So the Aura Sight's not actually a bad top deck. Can play that into Repurposing Bay, exiling the tablets. So then I don't have to worry about Revelation for a bit longer. Is this an Abrade? Wow, okay. Abrade, sometimes main decked. For this specific matchup, I have to imagine, or maybe to destroy opposing tablets. So we don't get a bunch of tokens, that's a setback. Now I need to first get another Synthesizer before we can keep things going. But yeah, this is looking more and more like a matchup where harnessing the Mind Stone could come in handy. Thor getting back a Braid is painful. Find another Repurposing Bay. Alright, so one of our artifacts is going to get removed. I think we still get another Synthesizer going. In fact, I can get 2 of them going. A Relic is good enough, but I'm going to shuffle again here. Yeah, if I go for Fire Crystal, we don't have lethal yet, although it would be a nice attack. So then, just get another Synthesizer here. And then I still have Mind Stone to either harness or sacrifice. Repurposing Base seems good enough. And we'll see what they prioritize with the Abrade. So then I'll have 1 Synthesizer left in the deck, which I can still tutor up, and then tutor up Fire Crystal afterwards. They have 6 mana, so still a bit short of Jeskai Revelation. Thor goes face. So then if they're keeping up a counterspell, I don't have to play into it. Can just double activate Repurposing Bay. Although I guess it doesn't hurt to put a 3-drop on the stack. Now if they also have Inevitable Defeat, we could still be in a bit of trouble if they answer the second Synthesizer. Thor attacks, maybe a Sweeper incoming, second main. Opponent lets us untap. Alright, I mean, step 1, get another Synthesizer. And the last one. then I can cast a Repurposing Bay. Ideally it resolves, but it doesn't really matter, and the opponent knows that they're dead. Then Repurposing Bay can sack Repurposing Bay, get Fire Crystal, give the team haste, and that's going to be more than enough. So yeah, this blue-white artifact deck keeps getting better and better over the years. The latest edition of the Mind Stone is certainly a nice one. Even though it's not essential for the deck to function, it's still nice to set up those turn 3 battlefronts. And in testing, I've had a few games where I've managed to harness the Mind Stone and then flickering your various artifacts to re-enable Synthesizer and maybe exile additional things with your Perilous Snare can also come in handy. So yeah, overall quite happy with where this deck ended up. If you do expect to face more graveyard decks, you can always add 1 or 2 graveyard hate pieces in the main deck that you can then also tutor up with your Repurposing Bay. Something like the Lantern at 1 mana can be found if you sacrifice a token, since then you get the mana value 1 card in play. But there's also a 3 mana artifact creature that can exile the opponent's entire graveyard when it enters the battlefield, so that one's maybe a bit easier to find if you activate Repurposing Bay, but of course being a creature means you're not going to find it with your battlefront. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.